Welcome to Char. My name is Rami Rivera-Frankel, and I'm here with Grammy Award-winning musician, Nelson Marquez. What's up, Nelson?
What's up, Rami? Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be talking with Martin Gomez, one of the co-founders and the chief operating officer of Wing AI. And when I mean AI, I mean artificial intelligence. Martin Gomez is a first-generation Mexican-American born in Los Angeles, California, and raised in Baldwin Park. He graduated summa cum laude from Sierra Vista High School in 2014, studied criminology, law, and society in UC Irvine through 2018, and got an MBA from Chapman University in 2020. As I mentioned before, Martin Gomez is currently one of the co-founders and Chief Operating Officer of Wing AI. Hi, Martin. Welcome to Char.
Hey, Rami, how's it going? It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Hey, Martin.
All right, let's get into it. So, Martin, can you tell us about growing up in Baldwin Park and what that was like for you?
Yeah, definitely. Baldwin Park was a, the typical, middle class, sort of working class community. It really epitomizes the suburban suburbs of America. It's only really famous for one reason only, Baldwin Park, and that's because the first In-N-Out was made there. Other than that, it's a working class community centered around sports, Hispanic values. Growing up as a first generation American, coming from parents that, that immigrated from Mexico, a lot of the sort of dreams and objectives of the community is to send people to college. And so there's sort of a big movement, in Baldwin Park, and generally you're growing up of pushing people to go to college. And so, that's kind of what sort of led my journey here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are you the first generation college graduate?
Technically, in the United States, I'm the first person in my family that's ever graduated a four-year university. So yeah, that was a huge accomplishment. Obviously, meant a lot for my dad, meant a lot for my family. And it's interesting because I've been the first of many to do a lot of things. I was the first person probably in my family to probably ever travel, 2,000 miles away from the continent, and that's ever been on the other side of the hemisphere. There's a lot of first things that, the first person to have access to a computer, the first person to have access to a cell phone, right? And so I was always that first, almost like that first person. I'm millennial Gen Z 96, so didn't really grow up with the cell phone, but ended up obviously like everyone else transitioned into it. So I was sort of the first to get internet, first to get a computer. So really, a lot of that sort of pressure almost felt like it was Hercules-like pressure that everything was sort of thrown on top of me, and I had to sort of figure it out, sort of dissect a lot of innovation, and really just grow with it, and have no one really to have that actual the tenure support, right? That my parents weren't engineers, they weren't IT people, setting up a router, things like that. All those things were done by someone like myself.
Interesting. How did you get into UC Irvine?
Yeah, so just like every other person around there, everyone hears UCLA because that's like the school, right? And I had never heard about UC Irvine, didn't even know what it even existed. I later remember that we did a job right across the street from UC Irvine, and when I moved in eventually to the community, I remembered that I had a flashback. But I heard about UC Irvine from a math teacher who told me that I was good at math, which I wasn't, but she believed that I was. My brother's a lot smarter than me on that front. So she told me she went to UC Irvine, loved it, that it's a great community, very safe, very different, right? You can leave your bicycle in the front yard and everything's going to be okay. It's sort of that kind of community, which obviously for me was, foreign. And so, for us, a lot of that, for a lot of people that applied to UC Irvine, it was on the list at the very bottom because, the UC Irvine towards the bottom, right? You have Berkeley at LA, you have UCR because a lot of people end up going there. So Irvine was just on the list, and I just applied to it. Frankly, there wasn't anything beautiful about it that caught my eye. It was honestly just fundamental luck that actually ended up being the school that I applied to. And I got into a few Cal States, didn't get into UCLA, didn't get into Berkeley, didn't even apply to San Diego. I thought I wanted to stay local, and I figured probably not going to get into UC Irvine anyways. But then from that sort of logic at that point, a lot of the faculty that knew me, saw my grades and said, you should apply for an Ivy League. And, I didn't know which one to apply. So I just picked one out of the box. I'm like, oh, Princeton sounds like a cool one. I looked at the campus, applied to Princeton, wrote the five 5-page essays, and it got into Princeton. Long story short, they didn't give me a full ride. So it was still going to be really meaningfully expensive. So then eventually I heard from UC Irvine that I had been accepted. They gave me the two giant grants, and then figured out a lot of the people there were saying, hey, you should apply to FAFSA. What's FAFSA? Got the FAFSA process done, and I realized like, oh, it's basically almost a full ride for the first like 3 years. So, cost wise, like again, growing up, earning a lot of the dollars that we worked on in the construction and landscaping, we realized, you know what, like, is it really worth going that far for an Ivy League? At the time, I didn't know that what it meant, and so forth. But no, by no means, I think that UCI was a great choice for me. It was close to home where, I could live away, but still come back if needed. It was far enough to see a different world, see a group of completely different people with different ambitions. And so, yeah, I'm super, super fortunate for that reason.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned that you remember doing a job. What kind of job were you doing across the street from the university?
Yeah, so there was this client that my dad has that's a real estate investor. Now I know he's an investor, but back then I just thought he owned a lot of houses for the heck of it. And we were installing marathon grass. Marathon grass is this really beautiful piece of green grass that usually these giant trucks from like Lowe's, Home Depots come deliver. And if you're a professional company, you have a crane that unloads them and then you move them, and you have like 10 employees. At the time, and still this day, where we weren't this huge company, right? We were like a 3 or 4 person team. So I just remember, being someone like that was wheelbarrowing grass around like, age of 10, because that was a normal thing in at least Baldwin Park from my father's perspective, because he had done the same thing at the age of 10. And so I remember looking at the campus and seeing the anteater like statue, and I wasn't really thinking this was like elementary time, probably, if not early middle school. But then I actually went back, lived in the apartments adjacent to that community, and I saw it, and that's sort of what we were doing. So I was a landscaping grass installation, so a typical landscaping job that your average person would probably do, for a real estate client. It's optimizing the home and enhancing probably its value.
That's amazing. That's an amazing journey to be basically doing landscape and labor to eventually attending the university there. That's a beautiful journey right there. So you're in this process. I read that you some volunteer work as well during this time and working for some nonprofits.
Yeah. So that's part of the legal route, right? It takes you in sort of multidimensional direction. So I realized, what does the law field look like? So, I didn't know what, by the way, by the time at that point, I didn't know what a nonprofit was. I assumed all businesses made money. and so I didn't really understand the concept of like what a nonprofit is at the legal level and all at the financial level. So nonprofit work got interested early on. There was a community / like college fair, where nonprofits came, and I was like, hey, I should probably do an internship. That sounds like an important thing that, again, the counselors there at East Irvine aren't really telling you because they treat you as adults. And the counselors at the high school aren't telling you because of the resources. And so, you can kind of figure it out, what an internship is probably a good idea. So I walked through the booths. I saw one called CASA, which is the Court Appointed Special Advocates Group based out of Orange County, and I believe a few other areas. And I really, resonated with their mission was, they're really just representing, people that are underrepresented, legally. So, a lot of the sort of the youth in the Santa Ana area, Garden Grove area, oftentimes have a lot of issues with their families and so forth. And so they require a lot of legal representation. Obviously, I was no lawyer, but it was mostly sort of to advocate their needs. And so it was really interesting. I started realizing like, oh wait, there's like this whole like dimensions of divisions of law. It's not just like you're a lawyer that sit in a nice office with the tie. It's like there's like actual like proactive work. And so got involved with that nonprofit, got involved with the OC Bar Foundation, very similar way, jumping around and realizing that they're and then really trying to understand like what the objective of the company was. Because then I realized like, wait, there's much more than just being a lawyer, engineer, or a doctor. There's so much more in the world than that. And then I started taking an interest in business, and then ultimately jumped around, did a few internships in a couple of startups, worked at a couple of startups full time, and then eventually ended up, I got really interested in generally the business sector. So then I worked at a completely polar opposite company doing investments. Think about that, like jumping from like construction to nonprofits law to like investments. Went on YouTube the night before the interview, taught myself how to do investments on YouTube. And really, the strategies for how to, invest in equities and things like that. And did the interview, the guy liked me, and that's how I started Kickstarter. I just kind of figured it out on the way.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can see how, and there's definitely different strategies of investing, whether you're investing in established companies, but you can definitely see like a major growth when you're involved in startups, and there's something exciting about founding something new and creating something new. So how did you end up meeting your partners?
Yeah, that's a fun story. So my co-founder, his name is Char, he's the CEO of Wing. He wasn't my roommate, but he was my dorm mate. So Middle-earth at UC Irvine is sort of one of the major communities, 3-story buildings, 16 different buildings separated by, sort of like grass and like a fence area. And, he was on the 3rd floor where sort of all the international students were from China, from India, stuff like that. He was from Hong Kong. I knew of him, and I casually one day ran into him. He was hacking away at something, in one of the lobbies. I just thought that, he was so into it, but like the energy was there. And we basically kind of made the introduction, like, who are you? I see you you're the guy that runs around the scooter. He had a little like razor scooter that he'd get out around because he was used to Hong Kong's mobility system. That's always like train or bus and somewhat walking, but UC Irvine is notorious for those big hills on the campus. And so he was the guy with the scooter, and I recognized him. And so we started talking, and I thought he was a cool guy. And I back then, most of the people, that my friends were in other dorms. And so started talking to him, started hanging out. And what I realized at the time is, we were both 18 at the time, but it's almost like he was like 5 years ahead of me, if not 10, as far as knowledge, industry experience, just being sort of like the quote unquote woke in the world. And I was like street smart. He was very like future smart. And I didn't know AI, what programming or Python was. Didn't know anything about that. I just thought engineers and doctors, that's how I existed. And so, yeah, we started connecting there. Eventually he sort of got me interested in business, because I was interning and doing things like that. And he started giving me a little bit of advice, like, you should look for an internship for a consulting company, and you should do this to your resume and just like that. And then I kind of asked him, why are you here in college? Like, you don't even go to class. He was notorious for not going to class because he was an excellent programmer. I didn't go as far as call him a prodigy type programmer. Wow. He never went to class, but he got A's in the classes and B's. And, I asked him, how are you doing that? I worked at Morgan Stanley doing AI, when I was 14 and 15. And what does that mean? So why are you here? He's like, I came to America because I wanted to start a company. And I was like, oh, wow. Like I'm like 10 years behind someone else. And so I realized, what does it actually mean? I'm hearing my bosses talking about startups. I'm hearing people, seeing Joy Run come in and advertising on campus, Uber Eats, same thing, Uber. What does that actually mean? And so we, eventually got interested, became really good friends, best of friends to this day. And, we started just chalking ideas down on a whiteboard just like that, very similar to that. We would just write down ideas of like, imagine if the world can do this. Eventually you start thinking about what that actually would look like, and then we came up with the idea of the company, which is obviously completely different than what it is now. Thankfully, once we started to get off the ground, I realized that I was going to be the people guy that was going to go out and make stuff happen, the muscle of the company, if you will. Eventually transitioned to also being the brains. He was the pure brains, and I was sort of the heart and the muscle of the company. Early on, I guess the idea, and so yeah, and then recruiting a third co-founder about a year and a half later, a fourth co-founder about 2 years later, and that's how the 4 co-founders today.
Yeah, that's interesting. You talk about it, and you hear about this a lot in entrepreneurial companies that survive, and that is that they keep on working on the problem, so to speak, and that is that the problem may appear one way in the beginning, but over time there's different adjustments and different pivots. So, can you tell us a little bit about some of those like pivot points, like, where you started out as like a kind of like a college-based program, and you realized that wasn't quite working? What were the kind of like what was the process?
Yeah.
Between moving from like in essence, like what was the pivot journey, and how does that business model look like now? What is that business model?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually one of the most probably interesting, questions I get, from most people, and that is, we pivoted from the college model to the executive model because we figured there was a bigger market of people. That was always the plan. The plan was always to start with college students and trickle into the market. We realized like college students were willing to pay, but it was very difficult to effectively retain college students as your supply chain. And so we made the difficult choice of shutting the wing back in Pippi down briefly. By that point we were at USC. We were also at UCLA, and so it was very difficult, to sort of realize that like there's not I guess the point there was supply chain attrition was the direct thing that caused this to basically pivot into the executive assistant for for people and consumers. We started with that model, with the $10 a month model, to get basically an executive anything assistant. Again, we did that to get sort of capture virality, capture interest, and people really got interested when we launched it on product in February of 2020. We were in 105 cities within 24 hours. Like it was
wow.
like the growth overnight was because people loved it. Everyone wanted a $10 assistant, per month, by the way, for an unlimited assistant. In retrospect, right, that was a little bit foolish on our end, because our thinking was, we're gonna build the ship as we fly it. Let's give people freedom. Let's have assistants, and let's have assistants share accounts and do stuff like that. And that was sort of like we did that for about 3 months, and then obviously the beginning of COVID already hit, so a lot of the kill use cases sort of went away. A lot of the things that people love that's for, we had automated like booking airplanes, like, hey, book me the cheapest flight to London and make sure it's first class. We'd go out, book you the cheapest flight, come back to you with the reservation code, boom. Hey, I have a dinner with my wife, can you get us a reservation? We're building a lot of these automations. So we had the human element, which was like the assistant. We had the sort of almost like the autonomous car driving model, where our car was, the company, our engine was our system, and our human driver was the assistant. And so our idea was to like automate as we went. Much more easier said than done, for sure. Very difficult to do.
Right.
And so ultimately, because of the shutdown, a lot of the cool use cases basically went away. Dinners, flights, a lot of the cool stuff. People weren't traveling as much. So we realized, what, this is going to be challenging. There was never a point where we thought we were going to fail at this. It was more that, we realized that we should probably do something about it. And then one of our company, people that we were helping was a lawyer. He reached out to us saying, hey, you guys want to do this for my business? I really could use this for my business. And then we had never thought about doing B2B, because obviously it's a whole different monster. And we said yes, why not? We spent a month building the platform. He waited for us for a month, and we charged him, I think, like $600 a month. And he liked it. And then we realized, okay, you know what? There's repetitive value there. And then he referred someone, and then obviously we realized, wait, there's something here. And then we realized, then we started digging more into the industry. Like, what is the VA space? What actually is the VA space? Like the virtual assistant as like Google app, Siri, versus like the human element, right? And we wanted to sort of build, like at that point, right, a platform where every company in the world could delegate work in one place and get it done reliably, and where we democratize the ability to get great labor from smart people. And at the same time, we, on the supply side, right, we democratize a way for people to work remotely. Because again, a lot, during that time, that kind of, for everyone, right, that really changed the world.
Nice. What are some of the suggestions you have for, let's say, a young Latino entrepreneur that's looking, or any entrepreneur for that matter? What are some of the recommendations you have to them?
Yeah, I think it's a few. I think it depends on the industry they're in, but I think for the most part, the biggest things is like the world of starting companies, right, is is just like a roller coaster, right? The ups are high and the lows are super low. So I think the biggest thing for if I was talking to someone right now was a fellow founder or starting a company a few weeks ago, is both a privilege and a curse to start a company, right? The privilege is you get to start a company, and the curse is it's a very difficult journey. So the biggest thing is the work at the component, right? So I think my tip is work like someone's trying to take this away from you every day, and then you'll get to a place where you want. Write stuff down. That's such small thing. But you can only imagine the amount of times we've had meetings and nothing was written down, and then the next week we're not productive, or I had a really great idea, I didn't write it down. Write stuff down and plan it out. I think we like to say at this company, we like to play 3D chess, right? So think of starting a business like playing 3D chess, right? So at the three-dimensional level, right? There's market, your competitors, there's yourself, there's your team that's gonna impact you, right? So what are the competitors doing? What's the market doing? What are you guys doing? I think the biggest thing for starting a company as well is like the amount of hours you put in are super important. It's just like anything, right? Like if you wake up at 6 a.m. to go to the gym and you stay up at night and go back again because you're training for a marathon or for some sort of bodybuilding competition, it's gonna pay off. And in a similar way for a startup, right? If you're putting it in the work, I think, and obviously it's really talked about a lot, right? This idea of like, for me, non-complacency. I mentioned this from my dad a little bit. But I think it's like, do not be complacent. It's like, oh, we did a lot of sales this month, or I got a lot of done today. Right? There's like an objective level that you meet your goals, or then there's like a feeling level. Do I feel like I met it? And so I think being able to distinguish and being able to be honest with yourself with that, write stuff down, plan it out, and have a non-complacent mindset. Like the fact that, just to give you like a little bit of anecdotal, when we had no capital, right, we would go out to the bars in Newport Beach. I don't know if you've ever been to Newport Beach. There's a lot of bars out there. A lot of local dive bars. There's a Little Caesars in Costa Mesa. We'd stop by Little Caesars, buy like 10 boxes of pizza, go out there, sell each of them to the people coming out of the bar at midnight for $8 a slice. The pizza costed $5. You can imagine the margins we were making on that. Like, we would go out there and we would make it happen, because we knew that we took Venmo, we took PayPal, we took cash. We had at some point we had a little merchant services device as well to take card. Like, and we raised enough, just enough, to get a car, did Uber, right? And put that into options, exited options, sold the car, and then had a capital to start, right? And so I think the non-complacency aspect of that is what really gets, you got to be willing to do what no one else is willing to do. And that's the biggest thing, and I think when I walk around people that are now entrepreneurs, I almost see them as like, not people that are different from me, but just people that like haven't really experienced like, whoa, actually, you don't have to work at a company. You can start your own company, whatever it is that you're interested in, right? You can make it a business, not just for the financial element, but just for the fact that you never have to depend on, anyone or anything, from impacting through your future. It's really like your future is in your hands. And that's usually not really the case for a lot of people. It's almost like at someone else's hands, at an HR person's hands. And so that sort of element to me, into the founders, right, is what drove me. Like, there's a realization that happens. And so,
I mean, that's certainly the balance. And also it also celebrates the risk as well, because part of that is having the courage to take that kind of risk and the wherewithal to live in the uncertainty and take on the responsibility.
Yeah.
So those are all things that are great.
Yeah.
Do you have a personal mission? Does the company have a mission?
I want to really build a company that touches, millions of people. But more importantly, like I think a lot of the on the personal side, like my objectives, right, isn't to start a company and like go retire in like Cancun, right? That's not my goal at all. My goal is to start a company, take it public, and really leave a legacy for myself, right? I think of my parents, right? Like, with so little, they did so much with so little knowledge of the world. We're now like, okay, well, it's not just because of an obligation, but it's almost like, wow, like for someone that didn't speak English to start a business, make it, and be middle-class person today, like, not forget the financial side, but just like the accomplishment side. For me, my goal is like, I want to build a public company that like, lives, I don't know what it is to work forever, but that lives long enough to transcend a few generations, so that people realize, well, this is actually something that you can touch. You can go to In-N-Out to touch a burger, right, and build it. You can also touch this company that someone like yourself built, right? And you don't really see that in Latino communities too often, right? In Baldwin Park, you don't really see that. You hear of companies, oh, what's Uber, stuff like that, but you don't really ever see it. And so I want to embody a sort of physical, spiritual representation of what that is. And so by building a legacy company, employs people. I think another part of me, I think that a lot of the problems that, a lot of the issues that, face the communities like Baldwin Park, and just generally a lot of the things that inhibit people, right, can be, now that I've solved very complex business issues, I think at the company level, we want to go IPO, and at the professional level, we want to keep building companies. We have lists of companies that we want to build. The list really just go on as the kind of company that we want to build. And I think being a serial entrepreneur is something that at this point is inevitable for me and for a lot of the other founders, because we believe that, like, again, we want to build stuff because the journey is interesting, right? It's not just about like getting dirty rich, like a lot of people think about, right? Because it's, if you want to get dirty rich, this is not the place to be. Starting companies is not the place to be. I think that you have a better chance with crypto. I think. I think I think if you want to build a company and you build it from the ground up, and the journey, I think, is what really matters. And what I mean by that, right? It's like the people that you start a company with, like watching them grow, watching yourself grow.
Tell me about how the culture in your company has evolved and where you see it going, evolving, changing.
Yeah, so we started as like a very heavy engineering company, right? We thought AI was everything, and it still is a meaningful part It was very technical, very engineering type environment where if you were an engineer and you were a founder, it was very difficult to get involved with this. Not just because we didn't want people, but just because there wasn't any roles for that. I think the culture has shifted a lot in the sense that now we celebrate people that want to build big things at this company. I say build big things, right? Not just at the engineering level, right? At the implementation level, strategy level. I think, for us, right, we love people that take initiative, and culturally speaking, right, we're a people-focused company because we're a lot of our human capital is driven through a lot of the team members that we have, and so we tend to allow people to really work on growing the divisions that they're in, and that's changed a little bit to where it used to be where it was very heavy engineering, very like you do this and that's it. To now it's very much we want people that want to win. We believe at this company that winning is a conscious choice, that people can consciously decide to win at anything that they're doing. And that's our model. And so, obviously we've learned that over the course of time. And so with that mindset and that sort of at our creed, our culture has sort of become a place where, the account managers that work with us, right, are not just sending nice emails, right? They're trying to create value for companies. They're putting on the CEO hats and really we give them that power to do that. And we set the expectation that they're able to do that, right? And that they have a support network here internally that's going to make it happen. At the recruiting level, same thing. When we're recruiting people, it's we want to democratize the ability to get a job, democratize the ability to get affordable team members, but more importantly, right, create a community where there's this kind of mutual respect of we want to collaborate together and get our company, their lives, our lifestyles to a better place than when it was yesterday. And so it's interesting in that way because it's coming out of COVID, right? A lot of people have this sort of change in perspective of like, oh wow, that's actually I want to be a part of, right? I don't want to work at the bank anymore because the bank just cut me off. They didn't care. I want to work at a place where people know my name, and I think that's a very important thing for us. Where that's sort of how it's changed.
Nice, that's lovely. All right, well, this has been a fascinating conversation, Martin, and thank you for. It's just been great to hear so much about your experience and about your journey. I wanted to give Nelson another opportunity if there was any closing questions you might have, Nelson, or ideas or thoughts or feelings. What do you think?
Really, thank you for sharing your journey with us, Martin. It's very inspiring to hear your process and the things that you've been working on and your vision for the future. Grateful to be here. And what is it, if someone wanted to hire Wing as a consultant company or hire you as a personal consultant to help build their business, how would they reach you and what would that look like?
Yeah, I think the way they reach me, I'm always available in my email, martin@gatewingapp.com. Basically live on the email 16 hours a day for the most part. Even when I'm not awake, I have a system that actually replies. So you'll always get a reply from me no matter what. I think someone wants to really, I think where we stand as a company, right? Our goal is to really allow companies to refocus their time on doing things that drive top line, right? There's a lot of little micro things or potentially medium-sized important things that companies do that are important, but the key employees should probably not be focusing on that, because there's so many bigger things that need to be done. And so oftentimes, right, it's very difficult to pay someone $100,000 a year to do like one thing, right? There will often wear multiple hats. Sometimes that causes, the issues that were operations. Sometimes that causes issues with throughput. So for us, the way we help companies is we allow companies to, maximize, their employees' time working on stuff that truly matters and drives top line.
Yeah, well, one of the things that really excited me about Wing was that in looking at issues around like finding an assistant, and I think COVID really drove this. Like traditionally, you would hire assistant and you would be working in the same offices, but with COVID, everybody was working remote, so it really opened up, I think, my eyes and a lot of people's eyes in terms of, well, maybe, since everybody's remote anyway, maybe there's an opportunity for, a more remote assistant, even thinking about the possibilities of finding someone offshore. So my process was, looking at the different companies and, Fiverr and Upwork and working through these different companies to hire very specific people to do specific jobs. Like, let's say I wanted something with graphics, some editing, just very specific, kind of on a project by project basis. And, and as I was thinking more about it, and, there were different issues of like security and like how to, if I'm going to have a personal assistant, they're going to have access to a lot of my information. Like if I want them like a normal personal assistant, there a lot of times they're accessing your email and personal information. Like, how do I balance that? And one of the things that I saw that was really attractive about Wing is that your company had solved some of those problems, things that would, become barriers of entry for having an assistant. Wing solved those problems. Can you share a little bit about that, about how you guys looked at the problem and then came up with different solutions to solve those problems?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the main issue with that whole space, right, is the fact that there's no way to centralize communication, centralize work, and centralize consistency. And so we wanted to create a platform where you can actually do that. And we're still building the new version, which you'll probably see it in a few weeks, actually, the new version of our web app. And that is like create a project management tool where you can manage team members, keep everything organized, credentials, workflows, things like that. I think the other one is the management component, right? Like I think where the fibers and others sort of lack is like the management component. A lot of these team members, right, like have they have their own routines, their own preferences, their own issues as well, right? And so I think oftentimes, right, when it's you and them by themselves, it's very difficult to have that support. And I think I've always as a co-founder, I've always told the team, that the management process, the fact that it's a managed service, right, where there is someone always sort of aware of what's going on and there's a hierarchy in place, verticalized and horizontal, I think is the key thing that for us, right, it's like having roles of like, hey, we built this this platform and this sort of team dynamic so that everything is managed. I think the way we solved that was through quality enforcement systems, like that detect issues, hey, we haven't replied in this time, setting the right precedents in place and the expectations of like, here's how to simplify communication, setting the SOPs in place that are the top 5 general SOPs that will be successful, and implementing that so that everyone follows the same way and keep it very uniform. Things like that have really solved a lot of that.
Yeah, that's great. And I think for me, like one of the challenges was figuring out, the best way to work. And since I was used to doing everything myself, I hadn't really developed SOPs for someone else. And so creating those SOPs has been a real game changer for us. And actually working with our VA, we're actually work together. And as we're managing things, we're also fine tuning it in real time and creating operating procedures that then we are evolving together. And if there's what I call a breakdown in procedure, because I believe in a no blame environment. So if someone's working with me and we're managing a team together, there's never a time where they're to blame, because I don't believe in blame. I think blame is a waste of good energy. Instead, it's more of an innovative culture and an innovative model. And in an innovative model, there's no blame. There's innovation. And any time that there's a challenge or a breakdown in process, it's actually, what is the opportunity? First of all, what happened? And then what is the opportunity to create a better process?
Yeah.
And so working within that sandbox has been really very productive and really great for the whole process.
Yeah, you got the full story. I think you got the full picture of my story of where I came from and kind of how I got here. I think maybe something that people would probably want to know is how do I even get involved with a startup, right? How do I get involved in a business, right? That's growing. I think that's like maybe the only section that maybe like if someone that's of Latino descent, Hispanic descent, right, listen to this, right, like what is their call to action, right? Listen to this, right? And I think about that, like their call to action is how do I get involved? How do I start, right? And I think the biggest answer is YouTube. YouTube has so much information, right, about companies, startups in general, like what a startup is, right? Startups are not always just software and technology, right? I know people that create like cake companies that they give me cakes for my birthday because I work with them and they're awesome, right? Or people that want to start like a financially sort of segmented coffee brand for people that are enthusiasts in New York, right? So I think the biggest way is like, it's for whoever's watching this, I think it's the way to get involved in a startup, right, is you start by researching, what a startup is. And I think YouTube is your best friend, right? Subscribing to a lot of the YouTube or articles that talk about what's the new startups, right? Maybe you go to downtown LA, you see those Lime bike scooters, right? Google Lime scooter, see and see where that journey takes you, right? And really follow it through and really figure out how did it even get there, right? And I think element, I think is something that people will get excited about, realizing like, oh wow, this came from a manufacturing plant that was and someone thought about how to distribute these scooters out, and that person can also be a version of yourself in the future for a different application.
Nice. That's beautiful piece of advice. And thank you so much, Martin Gomez from Wing AI, for sharing your journey and for being with us here at Char. And if you enjoyed the video and enjoyed the conversation and would like to hear more conversations, please subscribe. And thank you all for joining us on this journey. And we look forward to our next conversation with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rami. It's a pleasure.